Across Africa, at least 6.1 million people have now been affected by one of the most severe and longest droughts in recent history. It is expected to continue well into 2023. This includes 24.1 million people in Ethiopia, 7.8 million people in Somalia, and 4.35 million people in Kenya. Hundreds of thousands of people are at the risk of starvation, and millions are facing crisis level of hunger. With the catastrophe unfolding in Somalia, the country has now been blighted by the longest and the most severe drought in recent history, which is expected to continue well into 2023. Entire communities are bearing the brunt of the worsening food crisis, but as it's often the case, women and girls are paying an unacceptable high price. So how has the United Nations Population Fund across the Horn of Africa worked with governments and partners to prioritize the scale-up of essential and life-saving maternal health and protection services for women and girls? So joining us now on the morning show to discuss this is Niyi Ojuolape, resident rep of the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA. Welcome to the program. It's a joy to have you. I mean, how can we put sanity back to the level of decadence as regards environmental hazards in Africa? Because this is grueling, and women and children are facing the terrible brunt of this starvation occasioned by the drought and climate change crisis. Niyi?
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. The problem in Somalia is actually primarily a natural problem. That is the problem of the drought. But in addition, there are a couple of issues that are that we need to take cognizance of. Number one, there is a massive displacement across the country because there's a lot of conflict. There are intra-ethnic conflicts, and also there is the issue of violent extremism. Apart from that of violent conflict, then in addition there is also chronic political instability. Now joined with the issue of conflict and nature. Right now we're entering the fifth rainy season without rain, and so there is a drought, and the drought has occasioned a lot of suffering for people and displacement across the board. And so the natural issue, the climate change issue, there's really nothing anybody can do about that. But there are the human elements of it, which has to do with the mass displacement, which has to do with the conflict and all of that. So those are the ones that people can really do anything about. But then the effects of the situation that we have on the ground calls on everybody across the world to help Somalia as a country. And if I may, the way everybody looks at it when you talk about drought or famine, as the case may be, everybody thinks about food and water. Everybody thinks about shelter and the suffering of especially of children and malnourishment. But there is the issue that comes to mind, which nobody would ordinarily think of. That is how it affects women and children, how it affects especially women of reproductive age. And that's why for us in the United Nations Population Fund, we look at it from that lens, from the lens of women of reproductive age, because in this drought-affected situation, we have about 2 million women of reproductive age who are affected. And if you extrapolate from that, we have about 250,000 women that are currently pregnant. And of those that are currently pregnant, you'll be able to say there are about 84,000 of them that will have to deliver within the next 3 months. And if you look at what the figures have been in times past, about 12 or 13,000 of them will have complications in the process of birth delivery. And that is where the death occurs.
Yeah. Thank you very much for highlighting the disproportionate way that women and children are affected. In fact, from your report, it says that there's a triple threat. 1, survival for themselves, caring for their family, and 3, sexual violence. Now, in a recent report that you released, you talked about the UNFPA's response in Somalia and the Horn of Africa, that's Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia in your report. Can you share some of the responses, the resources you've used, the response mechanism, and how this has worked?
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for that question. Because we look at things from the lens of how it affects women of reproductive age, that's those that are pregnant, those that are lactating, and what the undue burden that they carry. And also there is also the risk of gender-based violence. I mean, there is a high incidence of gender-based violence. So what we do is we have been able to put together a system and service delivery through ongoing program adaptation, because we have service delivery points at 69 centers across the country. That's UNFPA. We have service delivery points that provides emergency, maternal, and newborn child care. So of all of those, we have rearranged our situation and our services so that we can respond to the drought. That is the first one. Then secondly, what we have done is also to ensure that we take service delivery through establishing facilities at IDP camps. So in the IDP camps across the country, there are more than 3,000 IDP camps. So people are in one place or the other because they are displaced. So we've had to take our services to them there. Then the second prong of our response has to do with the provision of services that has to do with gender-based violence, because there is rape. There are all forms of gender-based violence. So it needs for us to have experts who are well-versed in delivering of services concerning clinical management of rape, for example. So the sexual and reproductive health response that we have is across the board, either in IDP sites or in host community facilities, so that they can respond to people. The idea at the end of the day is that when the woman is pregnant, or the woman that is unduly faced with the issue of not having a skilled birth attendant when they want to give birth, we provide those services so as to give them a fighting chance to be able to live even after going through that very delicate period. But let me also mention something that is very important, which most people don't really realize, is the fact that every month, a woman of reproductive age will likely go through a cycle called menstruation. That's a difficult period for a woman. But people don't realize it. So if you see that woman that is going through that particular period, then who still needs to walk, who still needs to trek for maybe about 100 kilometers in order to get to an IDP camp, it can actually cause death. So it is the same also for a woman that is pregnant, that is going through that period. So we have had to deploy as much as possible to ameliorate their sufferings during that period and prevent death.
Okay, let's talk about population as a general issue. 8 billion people on Earth. By 2030, a country like Nigeria will even have almost double the number that we have now. Do you think that we have a population problem in the world? And if we do, what are those things that developing countries in particular should be looking at?
Okay, well, I'll look at this not as a problem, but the possibility of a problem. A problem can arise from it. Because also the huge population that we have, it's only high because when we pit it against the resources that we have, so we see that we have a high population. Now, looking at it also in terms of, apart from the resources, we also look at the burden that population carries. Is it a young population? So we have a lot of people that are old, we have a lot of people that are children who don't work. So the working population that has to bear this enormous burden, that is where it becomes a problem. But then that problem can actually be turned across to become a dividend. We can get a demographic dividend from what we have. Why? It is by ensuring that we have family planning policies in place, so that we don't just have children that we cannot take care of. On the average, if somebody can take care of 10 children, that is fine. But if you cannot take care of how many children, so much children, just have the appropriate number of children that you can take care of, so that at the end of the day, the working population, that is a population that is producing for the country, so that they will be empowered enough, they will have enough people in that bracket that can take care of those that are aging and those that are still coming up. That is, so it can be a problem, but at the same time, we can actually turn it around into an advantage.
Well, thank you very much, Niyi Ojuolape, for joining us on the morning show today.